ever since October of 2024, this company has basically gone up, besides the Trump tariff situation where everything went down. And if you're worried about, is this company here to stay? Well, Nvidia, right? Big connection with Nvidia. 700 million private placement investment. So, a private placement is like an offering, but instead of diluting the stock by selling us the shares, us as retail, which makes the stock price go down, it's actually sold to Nvidia, which is generally, that's bullish, not just that it was Nvidia, but that it was a private placement sold to investors, not a public offering. And this investment supports NBIS's expansion in cloud-based computing, crucial for AI. Okay. They also plan to invest $1 billion in developing AI-related infrastructure in Europe. Europe's a little slow over there, right, guys? So, but they want to compete with Amazon and Microsoft. And it's hard to say exactly which company is going to be the next Nvidia, but the fact that Nvidia invested 700 million, pretty big sign, okay? And you can see when that investment happened. Well, it's basically way back, beginning of time, okay? November 2024. So this is a fresh chart. It's at a price level where you can risk pretty well off of $68. And if it breaks here, then you can risk $70 whole dollar level. Pretty reasonable price levels. And if we look sort of on the intraday, we can see sort of some coiling action, but more importantly, if we zoom out, this is a pretty important level. Okay, it's the high volume close. The close on the first day, it's high volume, and we can see that here. Look at all the volume here. $30 million all times 60, so it's actually 100 and what is that? 30 times 60. It's 180 million, right? $1.8 billion. That's a lot. Okay, public math is not my thing, but you can see it held that close pretty much, kind of dipped below, but now you can risk off of it right at $67. So that is a common technical risk right off of here. And if you do that, you have a lot of room to the upside. So we can kind of look as well at what people have been saying recently, outside of just the earnings, because the earnings are so new. It's such a new company. It's not really that interesting. But the similar analog is Coreweave, right? Coreweave is a recent IPO as well, which looks like this. But unlike NBIS, Coreweave sort of took a dive ever since its sort of June peak, okay? And Circle is in a similar breath, a stablecoin type company, and they've just been going down. So what has been going up? Nvidia invested companies, okay? So that's why we're focused here. And I wouldn't say that you want to completely ignore Coreweave, but just take a look at this news story here from Barron's, okay? Coreweave faces a wave of doubt. Rival Nebius is helping lift the mood, all right? And again, anything could happen, but Coreweave did have this Core Scientific investment. And as you can see from the chart over here, Core Scientific, well, once that news was announced, it really just unwound and came back to previous levels. So it's kind of sell the news, and that's kind of not, as bullish for Coreweave, and Coreweave sold off since that time, and actually a little bit after that time. If we look at when exactly that was July 3rd, and if we look at Coreweave, July 3rd was just about here, and we can see it sold off as well, basically, since that little pop, and then just bam. This was a run into earnings, and then sold off on earnings. So a lot of sell the news events, but you have to ask yourself, outside of Coreweave, there is another AI infrastructure play. That's Nebius right here, where you can see my mouse. And not worrying too much about the earnings, although yes, its quarterly revenue did grow more than sevenfold from the same period the previous year. remember the same period the previous year, it had barely IPO'd. So we don't read too much into that. And also revenue is not profit, but these are new companies, we need to give them time. But with all that said, Nebius is growing from a much smaller base than Coreweave. Be a little cautious. And Nebius was spun out from the breakup of a Russian tech company, Yandex. Yandex, you probably know and don't love necessarily, but it's a social media company, right? There's no Facebook in Russia or China. And they had a quarterly revenue of 100 million, okay, Nebius. So it's a lot, okay? Coreweave is much bigger, okay, about $1 billion. But all we can do is forget the earnings, which is why I said forget the earnings at the beginning or middle of this video, and say, look, this earnings reaction was downward, and this earning reaction is upward and holding. Okay, so it's more about the growth of the company rather than the actual 100 million versus $1 billion plus, and it's about this $1 billion plan of investment in AI-related infrastructure in Europe. Okay, it's sort of the next frontier. Europe used to be the first frontier. Now it's the U.S. bringing technologies to Europe, even though a lot of the actual intellectual capital does get developed in Europe. That's kind of how it's working these days. So NBIS is the stock. I gave you the plan, sort of a risk level of, this right number, 66, or if it gets up to 72, you can risk 70, and that's sort of the breakout level, 72, before we get up to 76. So do you have to get nitty gritty with all these risk levels? No. I mean, throw whatever 10% of your account in and risk 10%, and you'll risk 1% of your portfolio, right? And 10% of 70 is $7. So that would be right down here, okay? So as you can see, the average daily range is 6%. So 10%, you don't look for a day or two, you're probably going to be fine, all right? So with all that said, that's NBIS. We don't need to look at options. I'm not sure NBIS is even particularly interesting on the option chain. But if you do have questions about your portfolio, about options, I don't particularly like them, but I've been getting questions about them. There is a link down below to selfadvisors.com. Schedule a free call, 15 minutes. And if you're interested in day trading, which does involve shorting, there's a verified $9 million trader. He does short a lot. So it's a lot more risky, but his returns are also insane. And they're verified too. I'll log into his broker right now that he's made $4 million on it. So here's Adam, and you guys are awesome. I'll hand over the mic.